The judge's gavel came down, and the words cut straight through me. The court had ruled against me, and my own son and his wife smiled as if they had won the lottery. I laughed in that silent room while everyone stared, because none of them knew what was coming next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my head as I stepped out of the courtroom. My name is Helena Marquez, and at 68 years old, I had just been told by the court that I had lost my case. The ruling was not about millions of dollars or some grand inheritance. It was about my small apartment, the place I had called home for years. My son Lucas and his wife Melissa had managed to convince the judge that I should not be the one keeping it. They wanted it under their control, and they had the resources to make the paperwork look convincing. When the judge declared the verdict, I did not cry. I did not shout. I laughed. It was a short laugh at first, but it grew until the whole room turned to look at me. Melissa looked annoyed that her moment of triumph had been interrupted. Lucas looked embarrassed, as if my reaction reflected poorly on his reputation. Rosa, my daughter, sat in the back row staring at her lap, too afraid to take a side. I walked out slowly with my bag against my side. My steps were steady because I had already lived through harder days. 40 years in hospital wards had trained me to walk out of every crisis with a straight back. I thought of the long nights as a nurse when life or death balanced on the edge of my hands. Compared to that, losing a court case over an apartment felt like a small wound. But it was also a clear message. My own children had chosen humiliation over loyalty. Outside the courthouse, Melissa caught up to me. She leaned close and spoke in a voice only I could hear. She told me I should finally give up and sign papers for a nursing home. She said I was too old to live alone and that she and Lucas would handle my affairs. I nodded and gave her the kind of smile that comes when you know something others do not. Then I kept walking, leaving her in the echo of her own cruelty. I found a quiet corner at a cafe nearby and ordered tea. The noise of the courtroom still rattled in my chest, but now it felt less like defeat and more like ignition. I opened the small notebook I always carried and began writing. Not case notes this time, but the story of the day. Day 0, verdict against me, laughter recorded in my own memory. I knew one day these pages would matter. Lucas had worked hard to polish his image as a professional in finance. Melissa had built her identity on being the elegant wife of a successful man. Rosa had grown timid in their shadow, never daring to speak against them. For years I had allowed myself to play the role of the aging mother who needed them. It was easier to let them think I was fragile and dependent. But as I sipped the tea, I realized the mask I had worn for their sake had become my shield. The court ruling was the strike they thought would end my independence. What they never considered was that I had lived a second life for 2 decades. I had invested carefully, I had chosen my allies wisely, and I had learned that silence can be the sharpest blade. Losing that case meant they believed the lie I had fed them for years. That was their first mistake. As I finished my tea, I thought back to a night years ago. A night when a young medical student collapsed in the emergency ward with no pulse. I was the nurse on duty, and I fought to bring him back. His name was Hamilton. Today he wore a black robe and sat on the bench as a respected judge. Life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. I stepped into the cool air and walked toward the bus stop. People around me carried on with their ordinary lives, unaware that in my mind, the pieces of a long-prepared puzzle were sliding into place. Lucas and Melissa thought they had silenced me with one court order. They thought the gavel was the end of the story. What they did not know was that my laughter in that room was not madness. It was the sound of a woman who had decided the time had come to show her true face. That night, in the privacy of my small apartment, I unlocked a drawer hidden under stacks of old medical journals. Inside were files and deeds with my signature, proof that the woman they tried to discard was far from powerless. I placed the papers on the table, lined them neatly, and whispered to myself, "The court may have ruled against me today, but tomorrow will bring a different verdict." I was 19 when I first walked into the hospital, wearing the white shoes and the stiff uniform of a trainee nurse. I still remember the smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee drifting from the break room. Those walls became my second home for more than 40 years. I worked every shift they asked of me. Nights, weekends, holidays. I was there for strangers while my children slept in the beds I had made for them at home. Back then, I was already a widow. My husband had passed too soon, leaving me with 2 children and another on the way. I had no family support. It was only me and the job I could hold on to. The pay was never much, but I learned to stretch it. I kept notebooks of every expense, from school shoes to heating bills. When other young women were buying dresses, I was putting away coins in envelopes marked tuition. Lucas was the first to benefit from those sacrifices. He had a sharp mind and wanted to study finance. I took extra shifts to cover his application fees. When he was accepted to Stanford, I cried in the laundry room at the hospital. My supervisor asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine, but my tears were not sadness. They were the sound of a mother paying a price willingly. Melissa would later tell her friends that Lucas had built everything by himself. She never knew about the nights I sold my jewelry to pay for his books. She never saw me collapse in the supply closet after a 14-hour shift, only to wake up and do it again the next day. Those sacrifices were invisible to her, and maybe to him as well. Rosa was my youngest. She had a soft heart and often fell ill as a child. One winter she caught pneumonia and the hospital bills threatened to bury me. I remember sitting in the stairwell with the invoice in my hands, feeling the weight of numbers I could not cover. That was the night I sold my wedding ring. It was the last piece of my husband that I carried with me, but it bought the antibiotics that saved our daughter. Rosa grew stronger, but she never forgot the worry in my eyes that winter. I kept working year after year. The hospital became a place where I was both servant and soldier. I learned how to fight for patients when doctors ignored them. I learned how to comfort families who were losing someone they loved. And I learned how to survive on little sleep, little money, and endless demands. My hands grew rough from scrubbing and sanitizing. My back curved from lifting patients who weighed more than I did. But I stayed. One night stands out more than others. It was a stormy evening and the ER was full. A young medical student collapsed in the hall. He had gone into cardiac arrest. I jumped to action with the team. While others hesitated, I began compressions. Minutes felt like hours. Then his pulse came back. His name was Hamilton. At the time, he was just another scared trainee. Years later, he would become a judge, sitting in the same court where my children now try to break me. I never told anyone that story. To me, it was simply another life saved. But to him, it was the moment that gave him the rest of his days. I often wonder if my children remember the details of my work. Lucas used to sit at the table and listen when I told stories from the ward. He would ask if I was tired. I would smile and tell him that tired is what love feels like when it works overtime. Rosa used to draw little pictures and slip them into my bag so I would find them during my shift. But as they grew older, those small acts of connection faded. They no longer saw me as the woman holding lives together at the hospital. They saw only the wrinkles, the tiredness, the apron when I came home. Still, every bill that came in was paid. Every school trip, every graduation suit, every down payment for a new apartment. It was me behind the curtain, signing the checks. I never wanted applause. I only wanted them to stand tall in a world that had no mercy. Now, at 68, sitting in my modest kitchen with a cup of tea, I trace those years in my memory. I see the long halls of the hospital, the endless sheets of patient charts, the tiny pay stubs that barely covered rent. I see the sacrifices laid out like stepping stones. They led my children to comfort, while I stood behind watching them walk away. The court may think I am a frail woman who lost her only home. My children may think I am a burden ready for the nursing home, but I know the truth of what I carried. My story is written in late-night sirens, in the hum of ventilators, in the quiet prayers whispered beside hospital beds. I was not just surviving those years. I was building something unseen, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. 2 days after the court ruling, I sat in my kitchen with the curtains half drawn. The clock ticked louder than usual. My phone lit up with a call from Lucas. His voice was smooth, practiced, as if he had been rehearsing. "Mother, Melissa and I have been thinking," he said. "You should not be alone in that apartment. It is too much space for one person and too much responsibility for someone your age. We found a nursing home outside the city. It is clean, affordable, and you will have company. You will not have to worry about bills or upkeep." I listened without answering. The words settled on me like dust. He had not asked how I was or what I wanted. He spoke as though I had already lost the right to decide. Melissa's voice came on next. "It is really for the best, Helena. We cannot be here all the time to help you. In a home, you will be safe and surrounded by people your age. It will be easier for everyone." I could almost hear her smiling while she said it, as if she was offering me a gift. But there was no kindness behind her tone. It was a sentence disguised as concern. Rosa was with them. I heard her faintly in the background. "Maybe it would be good for you, Mum," she said softly. "You would not feel so lonely." Lonely. That word struck harder than the rest. I wanted to tell her that I had felt lonely long before this call. I wanted to remind her that I had raised her through sickness, that I had never left her alone in a hospital bed. But I stayed quiet. Lucas cleared his throat. "We already scheduled a visit to the facility. Tomorrow at 3. The director will show us around. You just have to come and sign. It will take the weight off all of us." When the call ended, I set the phone on the table and stared at the wall. My hands rested on the wood surface, veins rising beneath my skin. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of their decision. They wanted me out of sight. They wanted me placed somewhere convenient, out of the way of their dinners, their social gatherings, their perfect images. I thought of the apartment. The same apartment where I had returned after night shifts, where I had stitched school costumes, where I had sat at the table writing checks for tuition. That home carried every piece of my life, and now my children wanted me to abandon it willingly. That evening, Melissa arrived at my door. She did not come alone. Lucas stood behind her with a folder under his arm. She handed me a glossy brochure. On the cover was a picture of smiling seniors playing cards in a bright room. "Look how nice it is," Melissa said. "Meals are included, activities every day. You will not have to cook or clean, and the cost is reasonable." I opened the brochure. Inside were pictures of a cafeteria, a garden, a recreation hall. It was staged to look cheerful, but to me it looked like a waiting room for forgotten lives. Lucas laid the folder on the table. "These are the documents. It is straightforward. If you agree now, we can move forward quickly. You will be settled in no time." I looked at both of them. "So you already decided for me," I said. My voice was steady, not raised. Lucas avoided my eyes. We are trying to help you. Melissa folded her arms. You cannot keep pretending you can manage everything. This is the responsible choice. I closed the brochure and pushed it back toward her. I will think about it. Her smile tightened. Do not take too long. Spaces fill quickly. After they left, the apartment felt different. I walked through each room, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of framed photos, the worn arm of the couch. It was as if I was saying goodbye to something they had already taken from me. But inside, a different current was moving. I was not ready to surrender. Later that night, Rosa called me privately. Her voice trembled. Mum, I am sorry. I did not want to agree. But Lucas insisted. He said it was for your own good. I do not know what to do. I told her quietly, you do not have to do anything. Just remember what you saw and how it felt. She cried softly on the line. I love you, Mum. I know, I answered. But sometimes love needs courage. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table again. I wrote in my notebook. Day 2. They want me in a nursing home. They think I am weak, finished, ready to be stored away. They think this is help. They think this is the end. I closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. My hands no longer shook. My path was becoming clear. If they wanted to see me as powerless, then that illusion would become my shield. They would never expect what I still carried, what I had built quietly behind the scenes. That night I could not sleep. The apartment was too quiet, as if the walls themselves had heard Lucas and Melissa's plan and were preparing to let me go. I walked from room to room, running my fingers along the surfaces I had polished for years. The photographs on the wall seemed to watch me. There was Lucas at his college graduation, standing tall in his robe, smiling with the pride of a young man who thought he had earned every step on his own. There was Rosa, her hair tied back with the ribbon I bought at a second-hand shop, beaming after her first school play. I had been there for every moment. Now those faces looked back at me with silence. I sat down in the living room and pulled a blanket over my shoulders. The cold was not in the air, it was in my chest. It was the ache of being told I no longer belonged in the home I had built. I thought about the sacrifices that filled these walls. Each crack in the paint had a story. Each scuff on the floor was proof of life lived. How could my children believe that removing me from here was an act of kindness? The next morning I forced myself to keep a routine. I made coffee, watered the plants, straightened the cushions. I wanted to remind myself that this was still my space. Yet every action felt heavier than usual. I could hear Melissa's voice telling me I could not manage, that I needed to be placed where others would watch me. I hated that her words had found a place inside me. In the afternoon, I walked to the market. The familiar faces of neighbours greeted me. Some of them had known me since I was a nurse running out in uniform after night shifts. They asked how I was. I smiled and said I was fine. I did not tell them that my children were trying to put me in a nursing home. That shame was mine to carry. I bought bread, fruit, and milk. Simple things, enough to remind me that I still knew how to take care of myself. Back in the apartment, I opened a box of keepsakes I had not touched in years. Inside were letters, receipts, and small tokens from my life as a nurse. I held a thank you card from a family whose child had survived after a long battle. I held a worn badge from the hospital, my name faded but still legible. These objects whispered a truth that the court and my children wanted me to forget. I was not useless. I had been someone who mattered, but the weight of loneliness pressed harder that evening. Rosa did not call. Lucas did not check on me except to send a short message reminding me of the nursing home visit. I stared at the message on the screen until the words blurred. I remembered when Lucas used to call me after his first weeks at college, his voice full of gratitude and nerves. Where had that boy gone? I sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker. I tried to imagine what it would feel like to leave all this behind, to pack a suitcase, to surrender the keys, to walk away from the rooms where my children had taken their first steps. The thought burned my throat. Yet I also knew that if I allowed myself to break down in front of them, it would only confirm their judgment. They would say I was weak, incapable, ready to be placed out of sight. I closed my eyes and prayed for strength. Not the kind that shouts or argues, but the kind that waits in silence. I remembered nights in the hospital when machines beeped and families panicked. In those moments, the strongest thing I could do was remain steady. That was the strength I needed now. The next day, Rosa came by with a bag of groceries. She placed them on the counter without saying much. I could see the guilt in her eyes. "Mum," she said, "I do not know how to fight with them. Lucas has always told me what to do. I never wanted this for you." I touched her hand. "You do not need to fight for me. Just do not forget what you know in your heart." Her eyes filled with tears. She hugged me tightly, as if afraid it might be the last time. After she left, I sat down again at the table. I opened my notebook and wrote, Day 3. I feel the weight of their judgment pressing down. They see me as fragile. They want me hidden away. But my heart is still strong, even when my body feels tired. I will not surrender this easily. That night, sleep came slowly. Dreams were filled with images of sterile hallways, nameless faces in a nursing home, the sound of doors locking. I woke before dawn, covered in sweat, my chest heavy. I went to the kitchen, poured water, and stood at the sink. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten. The city stirred awake, and so did I. I told myself aloud, I am not finished. The sound startled me in the quiet apartment, but it was the truth I needed to hear from my own mouth. They thought I was at the end of my road. They believed they had the right to decide my future. They were wrong. For now I would let them think I was tired, uncertain, cornered. I would let them believe they were winning. In silence, I would carry my pain, because pain has always been the place where my strength begins. The morning after Rosa's visit, I woke before sunrise. The air in the apartment felt heavy, as if every shadow carried the words Lucas and Melissa had spoken. I boiled water for coffee and sat at the table with my notebook open. The page from the night before stared back at me, filled with sentences about loneliness and the weight of judgment. But as I picked up the pen, my hand moved differently. I was no longer writing about what they wanted for me. I was writing about what I had prepared for myself. I unlocked the small drawer beneath the cabinet where I kept important papers. Inside was a folder wrapped in brown paper. I had not touched it in months, maybe longer. I laid it on the table and removed the string. The documents inside smelled faintly of old paper and ink. They were deeds, contracts, account statements, all bearing my name. These were not the belongings of a woman ready for a nursing home. These were the records of someone who had quietly built a second life. I remembered the first time I saved beyond what I needed. I had taken a double shift at the hospital and placed the extra pay in an envelope. At the time, it was only a few dollars, but I marked it with the word future. Over the years, I added more envelopes, then accounts, then investments. I never told my children. It was easier to let them believe I was only a nurse scraping by. Their assumptions gave me freedom to build without interference. Among the papers was a set of documents labeled Marquez Health Trust, LLC. The name looked plain, almost meaningless, but behind it was something far larger. Over 2 decades, I had invested in small clinics, rehabilitation centers, and eventually telehealth programs. Piece by piece, I had become part owner of a network that stretched across the city. My shares had grown quietly, protected by lawyers who knew how to shield the truth. At the last valuation, they were worth $4.7 million. I ran my hand over the documents slowly. To Lucas and Melissa, I was a tired woman in need of care. They had no idea that every time they celebrated a birthday in a private dining room, part of the bill had been paid by dividends from my hidden investments. Every new car, every trip abroad, every gift I quietly helped with had been covered not only by my wages, but also by the wealth they never knew I had. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized years ago. The line clicked and a voice answered. "Mrs. Marquez," said Patel, my attorney. "I wondered when you would call." "It is time," I replied. "They want me in a nursing home. I want every paper ready. I want to end the silence." Patel paused. "Are you certain? Once we begin, there is no turning back." "I am certain," I said. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. Before hanging up, I added, "Prepare a notice for the penthouse. They think it is theirs. Remind them whose name is on the deed." When I put the phone down, I felt a quiet surge inside me. It was not anger, not yet. It was resolve. Later that day, I took a bus across the city to Patel's office. The ride was long, but it gave me time to think. I watched people carrying groceries, children running in school uniforms, tired workers heading home. None of them knew the storm waiting to break in my family. Patel greeted me warmly and spread the documents across his desk. He showed me the trust papers, the property records, the bank accounts that had grown with interest. He explained how easily we could revoke Lucas and Melissa's right to stay in the penthouse they called their own. He reminded me that every payment had been made under my authority. As he spoke, I felt the weight of years lifting. I was not the fragile woman they described. I was the one who had built a foundation they were standing on without realizing. Patel slid a form across the desk. "Sign here to authorize the first notice. Within 24 hours, they will receive it." I signed without hesitation. The pen felt heavier than usual, but my hand did not shake. When I returned home, I called another old friend. "Hamilton," I said, "I need to see you." The judge's voice softened. "I have been waiting for this call. Lunch tomorrow?" "Yes," I answered. "There are things I need to put in motion." That night I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. The shadows in the apartment no longer pressed on me. They felt like allies, keeping my secrets safe until I was ready. My children believed they had control of my life. They believed the court ruling was the end. But in my drawer lay the truth, and with a few signatures, I had turned their confidence into a trap. I wrote in my notebook before bed. Day 4. The mask remains on. They see weakness, but weakness is the curtain hiding strength. Tomorrow, the curtain begins to lift. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early. It was a quiet place tucked into the corner of a street lined with old trees. I had chosen it because it was discreet, the kind of place where people could meet without drawing attention. I ordered tea and sat near the window, watching the door. At exactly noon, Hamilton walked in. His presence filled the room in a calm way, the same calm I had seen in him years ago when he was only a medical student fighting for his life. He smiled when he saw me. "Helena," he said, pulling out the chair across from mine. "It has been too long." "It has," I answered, "but I knew this day would come." He leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Tell me why you called." I took a breath. "My children believe I am finished. They want me placed away, hidden where they no longer have to see me. They think I am powerless, but you know better. You know what I have built. I need to protect it now, and I need to show them what they have chosen to ignore." Hamilton listened without interrupting. His eyes were steady, the same eyes I remembered looking down at me years ago when he woke up after his heart stopped. Back then, I had whispered to him that he would live, and he had believed me. Now it was my turn to ask for his belief again. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That is not something I ever forgot. Whatever you need, I will help." I nodded. I need to make sure that when the time comes, the truth is seen clearly. No one must doubt who I am or what I own. The law has to stand behind me, not against me. He tapped the table lightly. "Then the law will stand with you. Just make sure you have the evidence ready, the documents clear, and the story straight. People will try to twist it. Do not give them the chance." I felt relief settle over me. "Thank you," I said simply. When he left, I stayed for a while with my tea untouched. The conversation had reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. I was not alone. There were still people who knew me beyond the image my children painted. That knowledge was strength. Later that afternoon, Patel called. "The notice for the penthouse is filed," he said. "They will be served tomorrow." "Good," I replied. "Now prepare the next step. I want the trust documents ready for public release if I choose, and gather the recordings I gave you." He asked, "Do you want to go public immediately?" "Not yet," I said. "Timing matters. Let them reveal themselves first." When the call ended, I looked around my apartment. It still carried the feeling of threat, but now it also carried the spark of control. The mask of weakness had served me well. They thought I was vulnerable. They thought they had won. But tomorrow, the first piece of my plan would shift the ground beneath them. That evening, just before sunset, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to see Melissa standing with a strained smile. She carried a small box of pastries as if it were an offering. "Helena," she said sweetly, "I thought you might like some company. I brought these for you." I let her in. She set the box on the counter and sat at the table. For a moment, she looked around the apartment as if assessing it, like a buyer inspecting a property. "We only want what is best for you," she began. "You should not think of this as losing something. Think of it as moving to a place where you will be cared for. You will not be alone." Her words were smooth but hollow. I studied her carefully. She wanted me to agree, to hand over the last piece of control willingly. I asked softly, "And if I refuse?" Her smile tightened. "Then Lucas will make the decision for you. It will be easier if you cooperate." I let silence stretch between us. Then I laughed lightly, not with humor, but with understanding. "I will consider it," I said. She seemed satisfied with that answer and left soon after, leaving the pastries behind. As soon as the door closed, I opened my notebook. I wrote down every word she had spoken. Day 5. Melissa tried to sound gentle, but her threat was clear. They believe I have no choice. They believe pressure will make me surrender. I closed the notebook and looked at the pastries. I pushed them aside. I had no appetite for sweet gestures coated in poison. That night, I prepared myself for what would come. Patel would deliver the notice tomorrow. Lucas and Melissa would see the first crack in the story they believed, and I would be ready. Before bed, I whispered aloud, "The time for silence is ending." The next morning, I woke before the sun. My heart was steady, but my hands felt heavy as I poured water into the kettle. I knew what was coming. Patel had promised that the notice would be served by noon. For years I had carried my secrets like hidden stones. Today, one of those stones would be placed in front of my children, whether they wanted it or not. I spent the early hours cleaning the apartment. It was not about tidiness, it was about order. Putting things in their place helped me keep my mind clear. Every dish washed, every surface wiped, was a reminder that I still decided how my home looked. By mid-morning, the rooms were shining, and I sat at the table with my notebook open. I wrote a single sentence. Day 6. Let them taste the edge of truth. Around 11, my phone rang. Rosa's number appeared on the screen. Her voice trembled when I answered. Mum, Lucas is furious. He just called me. He said some officers came to the penthouse with papers. He says you are trying to evict him. Is it true? It is not eviction, I said calmly. It is correction. The property is mine. They forgot that. Rosa whispered. He is shouting, Mum. Melissa is crying. They said you are destroying the family. They destroyed it the moment they tried to put me away, I replied. Do not let them confuse you. After the call, I felt a mix of sorrow and resolve. I did not want Rosa caught in the storm, but storms rarely ask permission. By noon, Patel phoned to confirm. The notice was served. They know now that the penthouse is under your name through the trust. The officers made it clear they have no legal right to remain without your consent. I thanked him and sat back in my chair. The first move was complete, but the day did not quiet. At 2 o'clock there was a sharp knock at my door. I opened it to see Lucas standing there, his face tight with anger. He stepped inside without asking. Melissa followed, eyes red, but her chin lifted in defiance. How could you do this? Lucas demanded. We have lived there for years. Everyone knows it as our home. And you send police to embarrass us. I closed the door and faced them. I reminded you of reality. That place belongs to me. You were guests, nothing more. Melissa's voice cut in. Guests? We furnished it. We hosted people there. It is ours by right. I looked directly at her. By right? Or by assumption? You never asked whose name was on the deed. You never wondered who paid the first installment. You believed what you wanted to believe. Lucas paced the room, his voice rising. This is revenge. Admit it. You want to punish us. I answered softly. Revenge is not served with papers. Revenge is loud and messy. What I gave you today was truth. You only see it as punishment because lies were more comfortable. Melissa gripped Lucas's arm. We cannot let her do this. There must be legal steps. We can fight back. Lucas turned to me again. We will challenge this. We will prove you are unfit. You cannot make decisions like this at your age. The court will side with us again. I held his gaze. Do what you feel you must. Just know that every step you take will lead deeper into the path you started. They left in silence, the slam of the door shaking the frame. I sank into the chair and let out a long breath. It was not joy I felt. It was the weight of confrontation, the heaviness of looking into the faces of my children and seeing strangers. That evening, Rosa came by. She looked pale, worn from being caught in the middle. She set a small bag of groceries on the counter. Mum, she said, Lucas is planning to meet with a lawyer. He told me he will try to take control of your finances. He says you are unstable. I looked at her with steady eyes. Let him try. He will discover what he never cared to ask about. She sat across from me. I hate being between you. I do not know who to believe. You do not have to choose sides today, I said gently. Just watch. Watch how each of us acts when the truth comes out. That will tell you everything. After she left, I sat again with my notebook. I wrote slowly, letting the words carry the weight of the day. Day 6. They see truth as betrayal. They call justice revenge. They will fight harder now, but they do not know how much ground they have already lost. Night settled over the apartment. I stood at the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Lucas and Melissa were plotting, calling lawyers, trying to find ways to twist the story. I knew they would not give up easily. Their pride would not let them. But pride is fragile. It crumbles the moment it is forced to face what it has ignored. I whispered to myself, "The storm is here. Let it come." The day after Lucas stormed into my apartment, I received a call from Patel. His voice carried a quiet satisfaction. "They filed an emergency petition," he said. "They want the court to question your capacity and freeze your assets. It is aggressive, but it opens the door we were waiting for." I listened carefully. "How soon will it reach a hearing?" "2 days," he replied. "But once it is filed, records are no longer private. This is the moment we can move. If you are ready to show the truth, now is the time." I hung up and sat in silence for a long moment. The mask I had worn for years was slipping by my choice, not theirs. It was time. That afternoon, I called Hamilton. "I need you," I said simply. He met me at the same cafe as before, though this time there was no calm smile. His eyes told me he understood. "It is beginning," I said. "It is," he answered. "Are you prepared for the noise? Because once this starts, there will be no silence again." I nodded. "I am prepared." The next morning, the hospital boardroom was filled with quiet chatter. I had arranged for a press briefing under the pretense of announcing an expansion of services. The journalists who came expected another ordinary report on healthcare. Instead, they found me standing at the front of the room, flanked by Hamilton and Ms. Alvarez, the Director of Communications. When the cameras focused, I spoke clearly. "My name is Helena Marquez. Many of you know me, if at all, as a retired nurse. But what you do not know is that I have been a silent partner and majority shareholder of Marquez Health Partners for over 2 decades. The network of clinics and centers you see across this city, the programs that have served thousands of families, are in part the result of my work and my investment." Gasps rippled across the room. I let the silence hold before continuing. "Yesterday, my own children filed a petition to declare me unfit to manage my life. They believe I am weak. They believe I have nothing. They tried to take what does not belong to them. Today, I am telling you, and them, that I am far from powerless." At that cue, Ms. Alvarez signaled to the technician. A recording filled the room. Lucas's voice, sharp with anger, echoed through the speakers. "She is unstable. We can take control if we prove it." Then Melissa's voice followed, sweet and cutting. "She cannot manage. We will put her away and handle everything." The reporters scribbled notes furiously. Flashes of cameras lit the room. I raised my hand for silence. That is what they believe. But here are the facts. Patel stepped forward and laid out the documents. Copies of deeds, trust papers, valuation reports, each stamped and verified. He explained my ownership, the legality of the trust, the financial independence I had safeguarded. Hamilton then spoke. "I am Judge Hamilton. Years ago, this woman saved my life when I collapsed as a student. I have known her strength ever since. Let no one question her capacity now." The room broke into murmurs again. Questions flew, but I remained steady. "I did not plan to reveal this," I said. "For years I chose to live quietly, letting my children build their lives on their own merit. But when they showed me that their concern was not love but control, I had to act. I had to make the truth known." The press conference lasted less than an hour, but by the end the story had already begun spreading across the city. News alerts flashed on phones. Headlines read, "Retired nurse reveals she owns health network. Family accused of betrayal." By evening, the footage was everywhere. Clips of Melissa's words, Lucas's threats, my declaration. The apartment was filled with the glow of screens replaying the scene. I turned them off one by one and sat in the quiet. My phone rang relentlessly. Some calls were from strangers offering support. Others were from journalists wanting more. And then came Rosa's voice, soft and broken. "Mum, I did not know," she whispered. "I had no idea what you had done, what you had built. Lucas and Melissa are panicking. They do not know what to say. They are terrified." I closed my eyes. "Now you see them clearly, Rosa. This is who they are when they believe I am weak. And now this is who I am when I show my strength." She cried softly. "I am proud of you, Mum." Those words were the balm I needed after the long day. Before bed, I opened my notebook again. Day 7. The curtain is gone. They see me now. The city sees me now. The truth is no longer mine alone. I placed the pen down, knowing the days ahead would not be easy. Lucas and Melissa would not stop fighting. They would claw to hold on to their image. But their battle would now take place in the open, under the eyes of a public that had already begun to turn against them. The quiet nurse they thought they could bury had stepped into the light, and nothing would ever look the same again. The press conference spread faster than I could have imagined. By the following morning, my name was in every headline. The quiet nurse, who revealed herself as the owner of a multi-million-dollar health network. The mother whose children tried to have her declared unfit. The betrayal was not just a family matter anymore. It had become a public drama, unfolding under the glare of cameras and the constant hum of news anchors. When I stepped outside that morning, neighbors who had once looked at me with polite indifference now stopped in their tracks. Some clapped me on the shoulder, others shook their heads with disbelief. A woman I barely knew whispered, "We are all proud of you." I thanked her and kept walking, my steps firm but my heart heavy. It was one thing to carry pain in silence, it was another to see it broadcast to strangers. By noon, a crowd of reporters had gathered near my apartment building. I stayed inside, watching from behind the curtain as microphones and cameras jutted toward the doors. Then my phone buzzed with messages. One from Patel, short and sharp. "Lucas is reeling. He is calling it a misunderstanding. Be ready." Sure enough, within hours, Lucas appeared on television. He wore his best suit, his tie knotted neatly, but his face betrayed the strain. "My mother is confused," he said. "We love her and want what is best for her. These recordings were taken out of context. There was never any plan to harm her or take away her freedom." Melissa sat beside him, nodding solemnly. "Helena has always been cared for," she added. "We are only trying to help. We are saddened that private family matters are now being twisted into something ugly." I watched the broadcast without flinching. I knew those words were not spoken out of love, but out of desperation. They wanted to control the story, but the story had already escaped them. That evening, the journalists camped outside my building shouted questions as I stepped out. I kept walking, but one question made me pause. "Mrs. Marquez, do you have proof beyond the recordings?" I stopped and faced the cameras. "Yes," I said clearly. "For years, my children benefited from my investments without knowing it. The penthouse they live in is mine. The car Lucas drives is financed by my accounts. Their comfort has been built on my work, not theirs." I did not want to reveal this, but since they questioned my capacity, let the public see the truth. They are not my caretakers. They are my dependents." The crowd erupted in shouts, the cameras flashing. I turned and walked back inside. That single statement became the centerpiece of the evening news. The backlash against Lucas and Melissa was immediate. At the bank where Lucas worked, senior management convened a meeting. They could not risk their reputation being tied to a scandal of elder mistreatment. By morning, he was suspended, pending review. Melissa's social circle was equally unforgiving. Invitations vanished. Her name was quietly removed from committees and guest lists. People who once flocked to her dinners no longer returned her calls. But the damage went deeper than reputations. Patel called me late in the night. "We discovered something," he said. "Lucas has been using funds transferred from your trust as collateral for personal loans. Without your continued support, his finances collapse. He is exposed." I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. Let him collapse. It is time he stood on his own feet. The next day, Rosa came to see me. She looked worn and frightened, her shoulders hunched. "Mum," she said, "they are falling apart. Lucas has not slept. Melissa barely eats. They are blaming you for ruining their lives." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Rosa, I did not ruin their lives. I ended their illusion. They built their comfort on lies and entitlement. The truth has simply stripped it away." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just want us to be a family again." "We will be," I told her softly, "but only if they learn what family truly means. Not power, not image, love, respect. Until then, there is no family to return to." That night, the story reached beyond the city. National networks picked it up. Commentators debated on panels. Was I a cruel mother exposing her children, or a courageous woman standing up against betrayal? Online, the voices were louder. Hashtags multiplied. Videos of Lucas and Melissa at the press conference were clipped with captions mocking their false concern. Supporters shared stories of their own parents being mistreated. My fight had become a mirror for countless others. The noise outside grew louder every day. Crowds gathered, some in support, some just to witness the spectacle. I remained in my apartment, writing in my notebook each night. Day 9. The city has become my witness. My children have become the accused. This is no longer private. This is public justice. On the 4th night after the press conference, there was another knock at my door. It was not gentle. I opened it to find Melissa, standing there alone. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes rimmed red. She stepped inside without waiting. "You have destroyed us," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but her anger still flickered beneath. "Lucas lost his job. I have been humiliated. People laugh when they see me. How could you do this to your own family?" I studied her carefully. "Did you think humiliating me in a courtroom was not destruction? Did you think plotting to send me away was not betrayal? You chose this path. I only revealed where it led." She shook her head, tears sliding down her face. "Please, Helena, stop. Do not let this go further. We cannot bear it." I held her gaze. "Then stop lying. Stop pretending this was care. Admit what you tried to do. Only then can you begin again." She turned away and fled the apartment, her sobs echoing down the hallway. After she left, I returned to my notebook. The ink spread steady across the page. Day 10. They thought silence would protect them. They thought no one would ever hear what they said when doors were closed. Now the doors are open. The world's listening. The following morning, Patel informed me that several advocacy groups had reached out. They wanted to join forces, to use my case as an example of elder justice. A foundation offered funding. Lawmakers hinted at drafting new protections. The revenge had become something larger than me. It had become a movement. I looked out the window at the city below, the streets alive with people carrying signs and banners, voices raised not just for me, but for every mother and father who had been discarded. I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. For the first time, I was not carrying this alone. The days after Melissa came to my door were filled with a different kind of silence. Not the silence of weakness, but the silence of waiting. The storm had passed through its first wave. The city had taken sides, the headlines had sharpened, and my children were cornered. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came to me again. They could not remain hidden forever. On the third morning, I received a call from Patel. His tone was calm, but underneath I could hear a note of anticipation. "They want to meet," he said. "Lucas and Melissa have requested it. Rosa will come too. They know their defenses are collapsing. They want to negotiate before more is revealed." "Where?" I asked. "They suggested neutral ground. I told them no. This meeting will happen on your terms. I recommend the main hall of the health center. It will send a clear message." I agreed. The next evening, I walked into the hall of the center that bore my name. It was not ostentatious, but it was dignified. Clean white walls, polished floors, the quiet hum of a place that served the community. I chose a table in the center and waited. Patel sat at a nearby desk with papers neatly stacked. Hamilton was present as well, silent but steady, a reminder of the law standing behind me. When the doors opened, my children entered. Lucas was thinner, his face marked by sleepless nights. Melissa followed, her usual sharpness dulled into weariness. Rosa came last, her eyes downcast, as if she wished she could vanish. They sat opposite me, a family in name, but not in truth. Lucas spoke first. His voice was firm, but the cracks showed. "Mother, this has gone far enough. We are ruined. The press will not stop. My career is over. Melissa's reputation is destroyed. Rosa cannot bear the humiliation. We need to find a way to end this." I folded my hands on the table. It ends when the truth is acknowledged. It ends when you understand what you did and why it cannot be excused. Melissa leaned forward. "We already said we were only trying to help. We never wanted to hurt you." I looked her in the eyes. Help does not come with threats. Help does not come with hidden papers and forced decisions. Call it what it was. Control, nothing more. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. I turned to Lucas. "You once told Rosa I was unstable. You filed papers to freeze my accounts. You wanted to put me away. That is not help. That is betrayal." He lowered his gaze for a moment, then looked up. "What do you want from us?" The room grew quiet. Patel slid a folder toward me. I opened it slowly, the sound of the paper filling the silence. "First," I said, "you will sign a statement acknowledging what you attempted to do. Not vague apologies, detailed admissions. The world deserves to hear it." Lucas shifted in his chair. Melissa's face paled. "Second," I continued, "you will repay every cent I have given to build your lives. Tuition, apartments, cars, weddings. Patel has calculated it. The total is $4.7 million. You will repay it in labor, not in cash. You will work within this network, at the lowest levels, until the debt is covered." Melissa gasped. "You cannot mean that. You want us scrubbing floors? Washing dishes?" I held her gaze. "Yes, I was a nurse who scrubbed floors after saving lives. I was a woman who sold her wedding ring to pay for medicine. If you want to repay me, you will learn the value of sweat." Lucas slammed his palm on the table. "This is humiliation. I spoke calmly. Humiliation is when a mother is told she is unfit, when she is nearly forced into a home while her children take her place. This is justice. Patel placed another document before them. Third, I said, you will sign away any right to inheritance. When my time comes, nothing will pass to you. My wealth will go to foundations, to causes that protect those who gave everything and were cast aside. Melissa's voice cracked. You are cutting us out completely? You cut yourselves out when you chose greed over family, I said. Rosa finally lifted her eyes. Tears glistened. Mum, please, is there no way back? I softened my tone with her. There is, Rosa, but not through denial, through action. If you are willing to walk the hard road, to serve, to change, then perhaps one day we can find our way again. Lucas sat back, his hands trembling. For once, he had no words. Melissa pressed her palms to her eyes. Rosa looked between them, torn but silent. I stood slowly. You wanted this meeting. Now you have my conditions. If you refuse, the fight continues. More recordings will surface. More truths will be revealed. The world already sees who you are. Do not think you can escape it. Hamilton spoke for the first time, his voice steady. These terms are binding. If you sign, they will be enforced. If you refuse, the consequences will be harsher than what you face today. The silence that followed was deep. My children sat across from me, their lives crumbling in their hands, while I stood firm. I had waited years to show this strength. Now it was theirs to face. I walked out of the hall, leaving Patel with the papers and Hamilton with the law. The night air outside was cool against my skin. I breathed deeply, not with joy, but with release. The burden had shifted. The truth was out. The terms were set. At home, I wrote in my notebook. Day 12. They sat before me broken, and I did not break. The debt is no longer hidden. The choices are theirs. Tomorrow they will sign, or tomorrow they will fall. 2 days after the meeting in the hall, the signatures were done. Patel delivered the papers to me in a sealed folder, his eyes steady as he placed it on the table. Lucas and Melissa had resisted until the very last moment, but the pressure of the scandal, the collapse of their standing, and the undeniable evidence had left them cornered. Rosa had signed with trembling hands, tears in her eyes, not because she was guilty of leading the betrayal, but because she was tied to them and could not escape the consequences. The agreement was simple but strict. They would work in my network, in positions where no privilege would shield them. They would earn minimum wages. They would cover the debt through years of labor, supervised, monitored, with no special treatment. They would surrender their claim to inheritance, acknowledging that what I had built would not flow to them by default. It was a contract that would either break them or reshape them. The first morning of their new roles arrived. I went to the health center early, not to interfere but to witness. Lucas stood in the lobby in a plain uniform, his tie replaced by a name tag. He was assigned to the janitorial staff. I watched as he took the mop in his hand, stiff at first, his jaw set in defiance. The former banker, the man who wore suits and calculated numbers with arrogance, now moved through hallways cleaning the footprints of strangers. Some employees recognized him from the news and whispered. Others smirked openly. Lucas kept his eyes down, pushing the mop with sharp strokes as if he could fight the humiliation with force. Melissa was in the kitchen. She wore an apron, her manicured hands raw after the first hour of washing dishes, chopping vegetables, scrubbing pans. The chef barked instructions, and she obeyed without the grace she once carried at parties. Grease stained her clothes. Steam flushed her face. When I stepped quietly into the kitchen doorway, she did not see me, but I saw her wince as a splash of hot oil landed on her arm. She clenched her jaw and continued. The woman who once looked down on me for carrying calluses was now gathering her own. Rosa had been placed in patient care, assisting elderly residents at one of our rehabilitation facilities. I visited that center in the afternoon. She was helping an old man into his chair, her hands gentle but uncertain. She caught sight of me across the room. Her eyes widened, then softened. She gave me a small nod as if to say she understood why she was there. For her, it was less punishment and more awakening. As the days passed, I continued to check quietly. Lucas moved slower, his back aching after hours of bending. Melissa's hands blistered, but she began to follow the rhythm of the kitchen with less complaint. Rosa surprised me most. She grew into the work quickly, forming bonds with the residents. Her laughter began to return, not the nervous kind I had heard at family dinners, but a warm laughter that belonged to someone who was learning her worth. The public followed every development. Photographs leaked of Lucas mopping floors, Melissa scrubbing dishes, Rosa serving tea to seniors. Some mocked them, some praised the justice. Support for me grew, but it was never about applause. It was about consequence. It was about showing that choices carry weight. One evening, Lucas came to see me, still in his uniform, the smell of cleaning supplies clinging to him. His eyes were hollow. "Mother," he said, "I cannot do this. People laugh at me. Former colleagues come by just to see me bent over with a mop. I cannot survive like this." I looked at him with steady eyes. "Then learn to survive. You thought I could be discarded after decades of sacrifice. You thought my worth was gone. Now you feel a fraction of that weight. This is not destruction, Lucas. This is the beginning of understanding." He clenched his fists. "How long will you make us suffer?" "As long as it takes for you to see the difference between love and exploitation," I answered. Melissa came next, a week later. She knocked quietly, no longer barging in. Her hands were bandaged from cuts and burns. She sat at my table, her eyes red but not with anger. "I thought I was better than you," she said softly. "I thought wealth and comfort made me higher. Now I see how fragile I am without them. I hate this work, but I also see now what you endured. 40 years of labor, 40 years of giving everything. I mocked that. I mocked you. I am ashamed." Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw not the cold woman who tried to exile me, but a human being stripped of armor. Rosa visited too, though she carried less guilt. She told me stories of the residents, of a woman who waited each day for a son who never came, of a man who collected photos of grandchildren who never visited. "Mom," Rosa said, "every time I see them, I see what we almost did to you. I never want to be that kind of child." Her words warmed me more than any headline, more than any legal victory. She was beginning to understand. Weeks turned into months. Their bodies changed. Lucas grew lean, his shoulders stooped, not from arrogance, but from labor. Melissa's hands lost their polish, but gained strength. Rosa carried herself with quiet confidence, no longer hiding in the shadow of her brother. The hardest lesson was humility. They faced whispers, stares, laughter. They faced the weight of labor they had once dismissed. But slowly, cracks of change began to show. Lucas greeted other janitors with respect. Melissa began to ask questions about recipes, showing interest instead of disdain. Rosa brought books for the patients, reading aloud in the evenings. I watched all of it from a distance, writing each observation in my notebook. Day after day, the ink filled with small signs of transformation. One night I wrote, Day 60. They are no longer the same. Pain has shaped them. Work has taught them. But the question remains, is it enough? The answer was not yet clear, but I knew the foundation was being laid. They had chosen a path I forced them onto, but whether they walked it with sincerity was still their decision. 6 months after the day my children signed the agreement, the edges of our lives looked different. The scandal had faded from the headlines, but the lessons had not faded from their faces. Lucas continued his work as a janitor, though his steps no longer carried the stiffness of shame. I saw him greet people in the lobby, shake the hands of other workers, even share coffee breaks with men and women he would once have ignored. He had grown leaner, more weathered, but there was a humility in his eyes that had never been there before. Melissa remained in the kitchen. At first she had been clumsy and bitter, but over time the rhythm of the work found her. She learned to cook dishes from scratch, to handle a knife with skill, to work alongside others instead of demanding their service. The chefs began to trust her, asking for her help instead of tolerating her presence. When I visited one afternoon, she served me a bowl of soup she had prepared herself. Her voice was quiet as she said, I wanted you to taste this. It is not perfect, but it is honest. Rosa had blossomed most of all. Her time with the elderly patients had given her courage. She no longer lowered her head or whispered apologies for existing. She carried herself with calm confidence, reading to patients, helping them dress, sitting with them during lonely hours. One woman told me, Your daughter has a gift. She brings light into these rooms. I believed it, because I could see it too. I kept my distance, letting them walk their path. But on the day that marked the end of their 6th month, I called them together. We met again in the same hall where we had faced one another before. But this time the air was different. There was no shouting, no anger, only quiet anticipation. Lucas spoke first. Mother, these months have changed me. I thought I was strong when I sat in a bank office in a suit. I was nothing but pride. Now I know what strength looks like. It looks like long hours, sore hands, and respect for every job, no matter how small. I am sorry for what I did to you. Melissa's voice trembled. I never respected your work. I thought it was beneath me. But standing in that kitchen, burning my hands, sweating over the stove, I realized the dignity you carried all those years. I mocked what I did not understand. I cannot erase that, but I can change what I do now. Rosa simply took my hand. I cannot undo my silence, Mom, but I promise you will never face silence from me again. I listened to them, my heart heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with the memory of betrayal, light with the sight of growth. I did not put you through this to destroy you, I said. I did it so you could see what you had refused to see. Family is not built on what one takes, but on what one gives. I gave my life to you. You turned away when you thought I was weak. Now you understand that weakness was only the mask I wore. Strength does not end with age, it deepens. They bowed their heads, the three of them united not by arrogance, but by humility. For the first time in many years, I believed reconciliation was possible. That evening we shared a meal, not in a restaurant, but in the cafeteria of the center. Melissa cooked, Lucas helped set the tables, Rosa served plates to patients before sitting with us. It was not grand, but it was real. We ate together, speaking not of wealth or power, but of small things, daily things, the kind of thing that make a family steady again. When I returned home that night, I opened my notebook one last time for this chapter of our lives. Day 180. Justice has been served. Lessons have been learned. Forgiveness is not a gift handed out freely, it is earned. They are earning it, and I am willing to meet them halfway. I placed the pen down and closed the book. My story was no longer just about betrayal. It was about healing, about the possibility that even the deepest wounds can begin to close when truth and justice stand first. If you have stayed with me until the end of this story, I want to thank you. Stories like this remind us that family can wound us deeply, but also that justice and forgiveness can live side by side. What would you have done in my place? Would you choose the hard road of discipline and truth, or the easier path of silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you know someone who needs courage to stand up for themselves, send them this story. Let them know it is never too late to demand respect.